Hey everyone, good morning. Get started in just a second. We just want to let you guys in. We'll start in just a minute. I like to start on time because these things are pretty quick, so we don't want to run out for our presenter.
Yep.
So for those of you who have not attended a Lunch and Learn, welcome. Welcome to today's Lunch and Learn. Happy Friday. Lunch and learn, dinner and learn, breakfast and learn for some of us. I am Kristen Gastaldo. I am the IFS Customer Community Lead, which means I'm part of the Global Customer Success team. I work with that team to make sure that our customers, partners, employees all have a good experience when using the community. These Lunch and Learn sessions, if you haven't attended one before, they're quick. They're just 30 minutes. They're designed to give you an overview of a new product feature or some resources available to you, quick tips and tricks around product functionality. We actually started these sessions internally and doing them just for our employees, and then we quickly realized that this content would be relevant to our partners and customers as well. So we opened them up to everyone. Thank you for coming. Today we're joined by Anders Blom, who is a Senior Technical Consultant for IFS. He's living in Australia. I'll be moderating the questions, so just post them in the chat or in the question section of the webinar, and I'll hold them to the end, and then we'll ask Anders at the end. So without further ado, Anders, handing over to you.
Thank you very much, Kristen. Yes, as you heard, my name is Anders. I do apologize for the strange accent. I've lived in Australia for about 20 years now. Very quick background about myself. I've also worked for IFS for about 20 years, both technical and functional background. I found my way around the manufacturing parts of the application quite well. When I didn't work for IFS, I worked for a consulting company for a couple of years, incidentally, in the integration practice. So integration, as I'm going to talk about today, is a bit of a topic of mine. Right, I'm going to turn this video off for a sec. My camera is pretty bad and my face is no better. So I'm going to try to keep this fairly short, I hope. Talk for about 20 minutes max, I'm going to try, and then leave some room for questions. Quickly going to touch on these things. First, the kind of non-technical side of integration, really sort of gathering the requirements and what is needed to go back and forth. That is quite important to bat that down, because it will influence the design, it will influence estimates and everything, effort. And the devil is really in the detail there. Then I'm going to focus a bit on what's new in IFS Applications 10 and IFS Cloud. All these new RESTful APIs you might have heard of that sit behind the IFS Arena user interface, and the differences there between them and traditional SOAP web services. Going to talk some examples how we can work with these REST APIs for both an inbound and outbound scenario, receiving data into IFS and sending it data back out. Touch a bit about it as well about the quote unquote old way of doing it, but IFS Connect, and there are also some legacy integration methods what we still have available there, and what probably should be avoided because IFS is moving away from it. If I get a few moments, I'll also walk through a little decision guide we're trying to come up with for an integration strategy document to me and a colleague Daniga I've been working with. This will eventually make its way into the tailoring guide in the technical documentation, the online documentation for IFS Cloud as well. Okay, so first up, things that are important to figure out before we even start designing an integration. One thing that is a real game changer, especially if we have IFS Applications 10 or IFS Cloud, is if whether there is a middleware or an enterprise service bus, something like that, available. You might have heard, I'm sure you've heard, in fact, that IFS has sort of partnered with Dell Boomi, for example. That is one such product, and it really does integrate quite nice and neatly with these new RESTful APIs that we have in IFS Applications 10 and IFS Cloud. Of course, some old things, always important to capture, what format is actually the data that needs to go back and forth between IFS and the other system. Is it newfandangled JSON, JavaScript object notation, very popular in web services and web applications nowadays. Is it XML? Is it something like CSV files, Excel files, or is it flat files? What is it? How can we get the data back and forth? What protocols? Is it pure web service calls, or do we need to find something from look up something on an FTP server or a file or something? Big thing is whether there are any data translation requirements. Do we need to cross-reference any part numbers, supplier IDs, etc., etc.? Other important things, how often does this data need to go back and forth? Like, is it a near real-time interface, or is it a nightly batch transfer, or what is it? Volumes are important as well. If data volumes are low, we can probably go for a more sort of crude and effective solution. If data volumes are really high, then we need to put a lot of effort even into a potentially small interface just to make sure the performance is optimized. And there are all other sort of things as well. Any monitoring requirements, do we need to be able to look in correct data, for example, after it's been received into IFS applications, or can we handle that off to some middleware? Error handling as well. Can we just use what's there out of the box in IFS and someone look at, for example, incoming application messages, that screen, or do we need to be able to report on errors and things outside so they can be centrally monitored somewhere else by the customer? Other things as well, encryption requirements, authentication. Can we do simple basic username password, or is it something else? Is sequencing of messages important, as it is there's some sort of conversation going on between IFS and the other system? As if we're receiving, say, a customer order or something, and we need to send a confirmation or some sort of response back. Right? All those little things there. The devil is really in the detail there. All those things, translations, frequency, monitoring, all those sort of things can have a big impact on cost and effort. So it's important to capture that as soon as possible. Okay, this slide I'm going to try to keep really short. It is there in the online technical documentation for IFS anyway. Brief picture of our architecture. What I want to show this for is probably going to focus mostly today on these new REST web services, REST APIs that we have in IFS Applications 10 and IFS Cloud. How they really sort of intended for human interaction for IFS Arena. That's what they've been built for. Now we can reuse them for integration as well, especially if we have something in the middle like a Dell Boomi. They're quite easy to access from middleware like that, for web browsers, and they're quite easy to work with. Of course, we still have a lightweight integration broker, IFS Connect, very handy for all those scenarios where we need to pick up a file from somewhere or drop it off, or if you're receiving a SOAP message that needs to be translated from one format to another before IFS can process it. IFS Connect is traditionally or more geared towards integration with other systems. Right, so you hear me talking or mentioning SOAP and REST quite a lot. What are those things actually about? Now, traditional BizAPIs, business APIs, they've been available in IFS applications since probably applications 7, if not earlier. They are based on the SOAP protocol. Now, SOAP is a standard for how web services operate. Think of it, I like using a little silly comparison there. Say we're building some sort of structure, putting pieces of metal and timber together. With SOAP and using a standard, we're kind of saying that, yeah, we're going to use metric nuts and bolts here. They're standardized sizes. They're M8s and M10s and M12s. And they look and work the same. So I can go to one hardware store and buy a bolt, and I can go to another hardware store and buy a nut, and I know they're going to fit together. REST is more a way of doing web services. It stands for representational state transfer. I'm not going to bore you with the details, but pretty much the whole World Wide Web is what's called RESTful. That's more as a saying that how we're going to glue things together. We don't really know what type of glue and how much. We'll work that out. game changer here, which I think is gaining a lot of traction, why IFS has jumped on here, is recently emerged something called OData that adds much valued standardization to these, to REST and these REST APIs. A lot of software like Del Boomi understands OData, so it's a lot easier for them to consume these new REST APIs that we have behind IFS Arena. Still some things to be aware of. Keep in mind though, our old BizAPIs together with IFS Connect, it doesn't have to be web service calls over HTTP, over the World Wide Web networks. It can be, we can pick up files, send to these, send files out. They can be on FTP service and whatnot. Whereas REST, it's web only, HTTP protocol. Our BizAPIs are coarse-grained. A good example there is that we can receive a custom order, all the lines, charges, and various things that might be associated with it in one single message. Now IFS will work out what to do with it. Our BizAPIs have been developed to do that, which of course means there's quite a lot of logic in those BizAPIs. The REST APIs that are in IFS out of the box and sit there behind Arena, they're atomic because they're done for user interaction. So we need to make one little call to say, now create the order, want to create each custom order line, etc. So primarily for user interaction. We can reuse some integration as well, and I'm gonna give a little example about that. See, gotta make sure I don't talk too much. I have a bad habit of doing that. Here's a little example of how we can do an inbound integration if there is a middleware in place. We can really hand over a lot of that effort to the middleware. So we might have some sort of third-party system they send through, in this case, one little example there, a complete supplier, vendor, with all this data, addresses, and it might be phone numbers, emails, and things like that coming in one message. It might have a format that's completely different to what IFS normally expects. If we have a middleware, such as Del Boomi or another service bus in between, what that could do is pick that message apart and just call various APIs, REST APIs, these projections as we call them as well, in IFS, with those pieces of data. So it means got multiple calls to IFS. There's always going to be some sort of integration translation going on, right, between two different systems. But here we can let in the middleware do that. So if there's a middleware available, it's really quite convenient. We no longer need to tailor IFS application, IFS Cloud itself. We can have that orchestration done in the middleware. So effort and responsibility can go over to the customer or partner or whomever is best placed to do that work. Makes it easier to upgrade IFS as well. We might need to tweak a little bit in the middleware, but third-party system doesn't need to be aware of any changes really. Same if the third-party system changes. We don't need to change IFS because we can reconfigure that process in that middleware. If we don't have a middleware on IFS Applications 10 and IFS Cloud, we can still build, develop predictions, these REST APIs. They take structured data coming in and we can do as much processing as we want with it. Now, it is a development effort. It's a customization in the customization layer. So it can be done by IFS, can be done by partners in Citrix build place or the new IFS Cloud build place. They are still a lot easier, at least I find so, a lot easier and more rapid to develop than the old BizAPIs. Similarly for outbound integrations, again, if there's a middleware, we can be really lazy on the IFS side. We can, in its most crude form, we can even have just an event action in IFS that fires on something. Purchase order has been released or whatever. Sends out the data just associated with that logical unit, that table, the data that's available in that event to the middleware. If the downstream system needs more data, the middleware can go and fetch that from other REST APIs in IFS, package that up and send it on. Again, we can hand over a lot of the responsibility and effort to the middleware, whomever is doing that. Customers might do that themselves, partners of IFS, etc. If that's not available, or we need to send more structured message out from IFS, that can still be done. We can get a little bit more fancy in event actions using something called Peel SQL REST sender. If it gets more complex again, we might have to delve into doing development in IFS, but if so, again, it's reasonably straightforward. It's down in Peel SQL. It'll be standalone from a standard business logic and quite easy to upgrade, etc. Also, there's one point there I'm going to point out a little bit as well. We have a new feature in IFS Cloud 2021 R1 that's called Business Process Automation. That's going to keep building as well. It doesn't do that much for us in the integration space yet, but that's going to change in the future. Like, for example, currently it can call projections within IFS Cloud itself. So if an integration is calling one logical unit, say supplier or something, we can have a BPA call out another logical unit, another projection, and put more data in, fill out some of the other tabs maybe on that supplier. In the future, that might expand so that these BPAs also can call out to other systems, so we can use them in integration as well. So keep your eyes peeled on IFS Cloud, because features going to be added in every release. I'm not going to talk too much about our old IFS Connect and our old BizAPIs, assuming that it's all news that you kind of are used to them and know them, else there is plenty of material on them in the online technical documentation. Just things to be aware of that IFS, of course, is moving away from SOAP towards REST and new projections and whatnot. So if you're on applications 10 and have a choice to go SOAP or REST, I would lean towards REST. In IFS Cloud, in fact, a lot of these SOAP BizAPIs that we have in up to IFS applications 10, they themselves are going to be replaced with sort of premium class integration REST APIs instead. We can still integrate with SOAP, with IFS using SOAP, but it actually needs to go through IFS Connect in that case, be transformed to something that these REST APIs understand. Right, a couple of things I was going to point out in particular here. I do like IFS Connect still though. Of course, if we need to do things like file polling, pick up a file from somewhere, IFS Connect is the way to go. Transformer handling in it is quite powerful. Note that we're not restricted, I should say, to XML. We can pick up flat files and transform them and send it to our BizAPIs, or as well applications 10 REST APIs as well. I might come back to that in a sec. A little cheat trick I've sometimes used. I'll touch very briefly on some of our legacy integration options that, again, I'll probably move away from going forward, especially if you've got a cloud-based installation of IFS. It might be IFS Application 10 or IFS Cloud, the product itself, especially if it's in IFS Managed Cloud. For security reasons, there are only certain ways they're allowed to connect to IFS. So REST APIs, it's the same way that users accessed the IFS through Arena, so that's preferred. IFS Connect, having that to pick up files from FTP servers or not, work quite well as well. What we definitely can't do in managed cloud installations is try to somehow access the database directly, which means that some of the oldest way of connecting to IFS, all our access providers like .NET access providers, or somehow going straight to database with ODBC and whatnot. That's a big no-no in managed cloud installations. Generally, I think you want to avoid that because we're going to more towards cloud. We still do have features migration jobs and external files. Both are little pros and cons. There's slight details and differences between them. I'm not going to go too much into details about that. Maybe just say the migration jobs, they're quite easy to configure, of course. Struggle a bit with complex logic, but we can configure that up pretty much everything. The external files functionality, sitting under financials, under accounting rules actually, but used for other things as well. Oh, nice, because they have some out-of-the-box templates. Like, for example, if you want a update IFS with currency rates nightly, download that and load it up to IFS somehow. There's a template in there for that out of the box. Again, we can customize and do all sorts of things with those, but not so much through configuration. A little cheat trick I have used on occasion there. If I want to use those in a managed cloud installation, we can cheat and use IFS Connect to move files. So, as I said, maybe we're getting a currency rate file from somewhere. It might land up on an FTP server. A migration job itself cannot read from an FTP server. The file to process needs to be on the actual machine where the database is, or at least accessible from that. But we can use IFS Connect to pull for files and pick them up and move them, and then run a migration job. Found that I've already spoken for about 20 minutes here. I believe you will have access to these slides afterwards. So feel free to read these. This is going to end up in the online technical documentation for IFS Cloud as well, the tailoring guide on selected parts of this. So I might leave the last couple of slides for you to read at your leisure. Maybe just a summary. It's a big change here, really. Again, is there a middleware service bus or something like that available, like a Delboomi? Then try to use, I would recommend using the various REST APIs that are there in IFS out of the box as they are. If you're on applications 10 or IFS Cloud, of course, they're not available in applications 9. Applications 9, we need to develop through customization these APIs, unless there are any suitable ones out of the box. But else, I'll lean towards using those APIs and do all that orchestration, translation of data, etc. in the middleware. Else on IFS Applications 10, IFS Cloud, REST APIs are quite easy to develop as well, a lot easier to find than the old BizAPIs. So generally where I would be going. I would only resort to migration jobs and those that are crude effective file transfers. If you've got something like a nightly synchronization of data, like loading up currency rates, that's my little example there. Right, that was a lot of information. I tried to cram into 20 minutes there. I'm sure you have lots of questions.
We've had a question come in, which is mostly about where can I get this content later? Because right, it is a lot to consume at one moment. So the session is recorded, and I will be posting it in the community after the event. I'll probably have it up by Monday. As well, I'm happy to share these slides in the same post. So we'll have those there. If you do have other questions, I actually don't have any technical questions, which I'm kind of surprised for. But if you do have some questions, if anything comes up, as you start looking through the documentation or watching the video, or just you didn't ask in the session, you can post those questions directly in the IFS community. And I'll get with Anders and make sure that you get answers to your questions. Anders, do you recommend is there any additional training, anything people should also be checking out if they're interested in learning more?
I don't know off the top of my head what's there in the Academy, but if you do have access to the IFS Academy, there are definitely all sorts of technical courses on IFS Cloud in there. a lot of that around the integration is relevant for IFS Applications 10 as well. So generally, if you see anything on Canopy about these REST APIs and projections, I would recommend that.
We have lots of all the product
share
updates
this,
here.
share these slides as well. At least for any employee who's on the call, IFS employee, this is a kind of very compressed contents of a integration strategy design document that'll be part of the global technical solution management processes. I'm not sure at this stage how far that will go, whether that will be distributed to partners as well. But although I know some selected content will definitely end up in the tailoring guide part of the technical documentation for IFS Cloud, which is they're available for everyone. So,
if we have time, I did have one technical question just come in. It says,
yep.
Can you use ODBC calls in an IFS Cloud remote deployment?
Don't know off the top of my head.
Okay.
Probably. Right. Which is IFS remote deployment again? Yeah. Because that is when IFS is sitting and IFS customers own either on-premise or on
I was going to say, I guess that means hosted
cloud.
on-prem.
So kind of, customers kind of do what they want. I wouldn't recommend it. It will be a challenge if the customer wants to move that from remote deployment to IFS cloud deployment, of course, because ODBC isn't an option there. And generally, just the way IFS is going, we try to keep a nice and clear separation between database and the presentation. I've seen that come up in even security audits and things like that at customers before when they looked at our Enterprise Explorer and the auditors saw, hang on, there's actually SQL sort of database calls going on, and we can figure out a bit about the database. It's good practice to have a nice and clear separation there, which we now have with Arena, where it's REST and JSON data flowing back and forth, OData flowing back and forth between IFS Arena and the IFS middleware.
Okay, so to clarify, they do say IFS Cloud on-prem.
Okay. Well, it is still an Oracle database there behind the scenes. So it would be technically possible. I probably wouldn't recommend it because you then have a completely different way for that data to get in compared to how data comes in from IFS Arena, the user interface. Technically doable, but you'll be.
You may want to, as I said, we may want to.
It'll be very difficult. Well, it would be very difficult to debug and see what you actually need to pass in because you don't, obviously you don't see those sort of calls from IFS Arena. It does its own thing. So you won't get any assistance from the API explorers or debug consoles in IFS Arena to see what needs to go in and out and what database packages to call.
We've got, if you have time, we've got one more question. And here, there's a little bit more to that that prior question, so we might just want to post that in the community and continue that conversation. But someone else asked, will Lobster be supported too instead of Dell Boomi? And are there reasons to switch to Dell Boomi?
To be honest, I don't know at all there. We're not restricted as such technology-wise to Dell Boomi, definitely not. IFS is partnering with Dell Boomi because we see it's a good fit for the product, and Dell Boomi have developed connectors specifically for IFS to make it easy to work with. But the nice thing with these REST APIs in IFS Applications 10 and IFS Cloud is they are based on that OData. It's a standard, right? So any middleware that understands that, you can use. So we're not technically limited to Dell Boomi, no.
Cool, thank you. So we are at time. If anybody else has questions, please post them in the IFS community and we'll be able to answer them there. We are hosting another Lunch and Learn on August 20th this month. We've been trying to do these once a month, but we had a bit of content come in this month, so we're hosting another one August 20th. It'll be about translations and where to find them. That's on GoToWebinar as well. You can find that listed in the IFS community to go ahead and register on GoToWebinar. So thank you, Anders, for joining us. Appreciate the presentation. I will get all of this in the community ASAP. And everyone have a great Friday, great weekend. Thank you.
Thank you very much.